Jeffrey Dahmer has done many horrible and unforgivable acts throughout his life, but we have created a top 10 list of the most disturbing things he did. Number 10. Dahmer's father taught him how to preserve animal corpses. Dahmer was just 4 years old when he began collecting animal bones because he was fascinated by how they would fit together. His father, Lionel, was a scientist and was struggling to bond with his son, so he decided to appease his childhood curiosity by showing him how to clean and preserve animal parts properly. Dahmer and his father would find roadkill together, take it back to their home, where they would dissect and clean the bones. Dahmer even had a collection of animal corpses that he kept in his clubhouse, some of which he killed himself. This technique Dahmer learned from his father was how he knew how to preserve the body parts of his victims, which he kept in his own apartment. Number 9. Dahmer planned to build an altar out of his victims' remains. During his hours of interviews, Jeffrey Dahmer confessed that he planned to use the remains of the victims he collected to make an altar to himself. He detailed his very specific plan via the photographs he took of his victims and in a drawing featuring 2 full skeletons and several skulls. He would arrange them on a black table set up in his apartment with a chair facing the shrine, making it a place for him to meditate, and so he could feel at home. Luckily, he was caught before his plans were executed. Number 8. Dahmer planned his first attack at 16 years old. As a teen, Dahmer fantasized about an attractive man he regularly saw jogging by his house every day. Once his fantasies became too great, he hatched a plan to attack the man and bring him into the woods to commit non-consensual acts. One day, he hid in the bushes with a baseball bat waiting for his target to pass. Fortunately, the man chose not to head out for a jog that day. After this first attempt, Dahmer never tried to attack him again. He cites this incident as his first real pursuit of violence against another person. Number 7. His parents fought over his brain. The bizarre and disturbing nature of his unspeakable crimes made Jeffrey Dahmer a particularly fascinating serial killer. Studying how his mind worked could potentially find an answer as to why he had these violent desires, making him an ideal subject in criminal psychology research. His mother Joyce shared the same view, and after his death in November 1994, she wanted his brain donated to scientists at California's Fresno State University for research purposes. His father Lionel, however, was against it, wanting to move on from the whole tragedy. The former married couple went to court over the matter, which ultimately resulted in his brain being destroyed. Number 6. Dahmer received a lot of money in prison. Believe it or not, there are many people in the world who idolize serial killers, and Jeffrey Dahmer was no exception. According to Wisconsin's Columbia Correctional Institution records, Dahmer received hundreds of fan letters and also managed to save up thousands of dollars while in prison. By March 1994, the inmate had received letters from all over the globe, reportedly racking up more than $12,000 just from donations. One woman sent him $50 so that he could buy cigarettes, stamps, and envelopes in prison. And he even received $10 from a 74-year-old nun as she was reimbursing him for postage on 2 art books that he mailed to her. She said he did awful things, but way deep down he isn't a mean kid. Dahmer received hundreds of letters while he was in prison, and while he only responded to a few, many letters were of the suggestive nature. Others reached out wanting to discuss religion, provide support, or just become pen pals. Number 5. Dahmer should have been arrested after his first murder. Dahmer confessed to murdering 17 men, but what is even more disturbing is that he should have been caught after his first murder. When he was 18, he murdered Stephen Hicks, a hitchhiker he picked up and took back to his family home. In the early morning hours of the following day, he chopped up his body and placed it in large garbage bags and put them in his car. He was driving the car when 2 police officers pulled him over. Dahmer got out of the car, and the police officers questioned the smell, to which Dahmer replied that he was taking old garbage to the city dump. The police officers did not investigate the bags, they just gave him a ticket and sent him on his way. And to top this off, there were over 6 more encounters where he should have been arrested, but he wasn't. Just goes to show that he really believed he was invincible. Number 4. Dahmer tried to steal a corpse from a graveyard. In an effort to resist giving in to his murderous compulsions, Dahmer sought out alternative ways to satisfy his dark desires. At one point, he stole a mannequin from a store and brought it home, and while it satisfied him for a short period, it ultimately didn't work. One particularly macabre idea Dahmer had was to obtain the corpse of a recently deceased male. He saw an obituary in the newspaper for an 18-year-old young man he found attractive. And after attending his funeral, Dahmer tried to dig up his freshly buried grave, but it proved too difficult since the soil had already hardened. Number 3. Dahmer kept a human head in his work locker. In March of 1989, Dahmer was still living with his grandma in West Allis, when one night he went to a bar and convinced Anthony Sears to come home with him. After engaging in intimate acts, Dahmer drugged and beheaded Sears, although Dahmer claimed that he did not intend to commit a crime that evening. After he murdered Sears, he disposed of his whole body excluding his head and genitals. Dahmer kept his head and genitals in a box, because he found them too attractive to throw away. As if that wasn't disturbing enough, Dahmer then stored the box in his locker at the Milwaukee Ambrosia Chocolate Factory, where he worked nights mixing chocolate. Dahmer stated that his work colleagues saw him as a loner, who kept to himself and didn't bother anybody, and that there was even a time when his locker was searched, but the investigators thought the skull was a fake as it was painted gray. No wonder why he got away with it for so long. Number 2. Dahmer's apartment smelt of decomposing human remains. Dahmer kept very much to himself, and many of his neighbors knew him as a nice young man who kept to himself. However, when the manager of Dahmer's North 25th Street apartment came to Dahmer with complaints of various tenants regarding the overpowering smell emanating from Dahmer's home, Dahmer blamed it on his dead tropical fish or claimed that his freezer broke and the meat contents went spoiled. He used this excuse more than once. While it was not technically a lie, but the meat was not animal, but human. While some claimed to have smelled little or nothing within Dahmer's apartment, typically police officers visited without growing suspicious or arresting him. It is hard to look at the collection of bones, body parts, and organs Dahmer had amassed, along with the prominent stories of Dahmer consuming his victims' flesh, and not imagine the smell of a rotten slaughterhouse. Coming in at number 1. He tried to turn his victims into zombies. Perhaps the most horrifying aspect of Dahmer's crimes, besides murdering innocent men and eating them, was his attempts to turn his victims into the perfect sex slave. Errol Lindsay was his first victim that Dahmer experimented on. Dahmer drilled a hole into Lindsay's skull and injected hydrochloric acid into the wound, to which Dahmer hoped would make his victims docile and submissive. In Lindsay's case, he awoke shortly after, complaining of a headache, before Dahmer sedated and killed him. Dahmer attempted this process multiple times on Konark Synthesumphone, before also killing him. Dahmer changed this process for the last victim he practiced this on, Jeremiah Weinberger. Dahmer injected boiling water into his skull instead of hydrochloric acid. Weinberger, like all of Dahmer's victims experimented on in this way, did not last more than a couple of days before passing. It's extremely disturbing to think that Dahmer liked his lifestyle and found it exciting and thrilling, and would have continued forever, if he never got caught. Thanks for watching. Let us know in the comments which one you thought was the most disturbing fact. Which top 10 would you like to see next? If you haven't already, don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next video.